Charles Elwood Yeager, who prefers to go by Chuck Yeager, was a test pilot for the United States Air Force from 1945 to 1975. In that time period, he flew faster than the speed of sound. The first thing you need to know about is sound and how it travels. Sound travels in waves, but how are these waves created? Sound waves are created by vibration. If you play the guitar, then you will see that when you pluck the strings, they move back and forth very quickly. This disturbs particles in the air and makes those particles hit other particles, creating a chain reaction which causes sound waves to form. Your ears are shaped like a satellite dish, so they can catch these sound waves and send messages to your brain that tell you what you are hearing. Sound travels at about 761 miles per hour. That is fast enough to go from Orlando, Florida to New York in about 30 minutes. If you can travel faster than 761 miles per hour, then you will have broken the sound barrier. And that is exactly what Chuck Yeager did. The speed of sound is also known as Mach 1. 2 times the speed of sound is Mach 2. Mach 3 is 3 times the speed of sound, and so on.
In California, on October 14, 1947, he flew a jet that he called the Glamorous Glennis after his first wife and broke the sound barrier. Once it was released to the public that he did this, Yeager became a celebrity and got an award known as the Collier Trophy.
The Collier Trophy is an annual aviation award administered by the U.S. National Aeronautic Association, presented to those who have made the greatest achievement in aeronautics or astronautics in America. Chuck Yeager was born in Myra, West Virginia as the second of 5 children. The town, if you could even call it a town, was only a few farmhouses, a post office, and a country store. His family owned a white clapboard house that stood next to a cornfield.
He loved anything to do with math and dexterity. He was also very fond of typing. Those were his best grades in school. His geometry teacher, Miss Gonza, said that Chuck was her best student. However, English and history weren't his strong suits. He was great at playing different kinds of sports with different objectives like pool, ping pong, basketball, and football. In band, he played trombone. In nature, he liked hunting and fishing. He and other kids his age liked to hang out at the recreation center. They called it the Chicken House and played ping pong and listened to music on records. His father was a mechanic who loved modding his car. His mother was a hard worker at home.
Chuck Yeager had to go through 6 months of intensive training with 29 other beginner pilots to become a combat fighter squadron. He had to live surrounded by Nevada sand dunes in a tarp paper shack that belched black smoke from the oil-burning stove that only warmed themselves on cold desert nights. Him and his fellow classmates had to fly from dawn to dusk with no breaks. They flew 6 flights a day, 6 days a week. Dodgefighting, buzzing, and practicing gunnery, they crawled exhausted into their beds at 10 p.m. and struggled to breakfast at 4:30 a.m., taking off on the first light of day, just as dawn broke. He logged 100 hours of flying that first month. In fall of 1947, Yeager started to try and break the sound barrier. This was extremely hard, however, because he had to have his X-1 jet dropped from a bomb bay out of a B-29 Superfortress. He tried so many times with so many failed attempts. Finally, one day, Yeager rode up in the B-29 Superfortress. Once they reached the right altitude, Yeager climbed into the tight cockpit of the glamorous Glennis. They counted 3, 2, 1, and Yeager felt his shoulders press up on his harness as the X-1 was dropped into the sky. He had to break the sound barrier, though, before he ran out of his fuel that was being quickly consumed. He started gaining speed. The controls started shaking as he gained even more speed. Then suddenly, he felt the jet surge past the speed of sound. The people on the ground heard the ear-splitting sonic boom. He had done it. He had flown faster than sound. After this, he landed safely on the runway as the first man to ever break the sound barrier.
This achievement, however, was not revealed immediately, and hit the public eye the following year. As we said earlier, Yeager became an immediate celebrity and was highly honored and celebrated in many ways. Chuck Yeager was 24 years old when he broke the sound barrier. That is pretty young if you think about it. He is now 96 years old and lives in California. But what did he do after his great achievement?
After Yeager flew faster than sound, he continued to fly in the Air Force up until March 1, 1975, when he retired at the Norton Air Force Base located in California after 33 years of service. Even though he is retired, he still occasionally flies as a consulting test pilot for the USAF and NASA.
He also owns a Twitter account and posts every few days.
This is how we communicated with him to ask him questions about his history.
Breaking the sound barrier by manned flight may seem to be just a scientific or aviation achievement, but it is also a historical milestone because for centuries, scientists and engineers have contemplated this possibility. It took 260 years from the time Isaac Newton first calculated the actual speed of sound in air to the first supersonic flight by General Chuck Yeager in 1947. This is a perfect example of breaking the barriers in history.
For centuries, scientists had known that cannonballs and bullets travel beyond the speed of sound, but were unsure of how a plane and its human pilot could withstand the aerodynamic effects that such speeds entail. The U.S. Air Force continued to fly the test flights, and as they progressively approached this possibility with each test, it dawned on them that a regular fighter jet may not have the thrust to achieve supersonic speeds by itself, so they devised a plan that finally succeeded. They had to fit the plane with a specially designed rocket engine and release it from an already airborne B-29 bomber. Surprisingly, the aircraft, its controls, and the human pilot withstood this first supersonic flight almost flawlessly.
It was initially a scientific fantasy to break the sound barrier by manned flight, but once it was achieved, it paved the way for it and influenced the development of other industries that depend on the reality of supersonic travel, both in civilian and military establishments. It paved the way for the advancement of jet and rocket propulsion engines that created military fighter jets that could travel at Mach 6. Civilian travel aircraft like the Concorde, which at Mach 2 significantly shortened transatlantic travel by taking just a little over 3 hours to fly from London to New York. Even though the Concorde has been decommissioned, it was an important feat that enhanced economic and cultural cooperation between the Americas and Europe at the time.
At the time the manned flight sound barrier was broken by Chuck Yeager, it was just a couple of years after World War II, and the former Soviet Union and the United States were engaged in a political, military, and scientific rivalry for superior, such that each country pushed the frontiers of technology and advancement of space as a kind of bragging right after each achievement. This was also the beginning of the Cold War between the two countries that not only accelerated the nuclear race, but also created a sharp contrast between two different political and ideological forms of government.
Why is this important, you may ask? Well, as part of NHD, it is important to recognize moments in our history that mark milestones not only for historical purposes, but scientific ones as well. Breaking the sound barrier was a milestone in the spectrum of achievements in human aviation since the Wright brothers first took flight. It paved the way for eventual technological advances that led to human space flights, including the moon landing.